Welcome to my library, dear guest. My name is Ko, and I will be your storyteller. Today, things will be a little different. Instead of reading horror stories, we shall read a few glory stories instead. 3 in total. I hope this will be a nice change of pace. I shall do without commentary this time once more, as I don't believe there's going to be much to comment on for each of these stories. So I hope you will enjoy this simple reading. This is for you, 1,000 regulars of my little place. Thank you. Let us begin with story number 1. The Time I Hugged the Big Bad Evil Guy, by the author Nemai Nev. The best campaign I have ever played was with my friends Newt and Green. The DM was the hero here. I never played with her before or since, but she made her NPCs make a lot of sense, with their own inner conflicts and stuff like that. Basically, she played all NPCs meaningfully, like sentient beings and not plot devices, which meant that they all had real motives, and most could be reasoned with. This helped RPing a lot, because more often than not, we'd find sensible solutions to our problems. And somehow, she made sure we'd have a fair share of combat regardless. She was a beast of a DM. I don't want to go into much detail because I don't remember much of it. It was like 20 years ago. But the story was about finding a powerful MacGuffin before the BBEG did. We went through political intrigue, war, dungeons, drama of all sorts. It was really fun. The BBEG's identity was obscure to us until the very end, and the not-so-shocking reveal was that it was one of our benefactors and quest-givers. It went like this. After we retrieved the MacGuffin, BBEG's right-hand man ambushed us and stole it, of course. We gave chase, but we lost him. However, we captured one of his men, and after questioning him, we had a trail to follow. We quickly discovered the BBEG's identity, and we went to confront him at his tower, where the final showdown took place. It was amazing. The tower we were familiar with became a living maze with traps and all sorts of nasty. We barely made it to the top, where pieces of the blown-off roof were floating about and the BBEG was casting the ritual that would end everything. His endgame was actually to blow up the entire planet with him in it. No dimension travel, no escape plan. Just a big-ass terrorist attack. We fought the nasties that were protecting the BBEG as he concentrated on the ritual. When we were done, we asked him to stop. Then, he began his monologue about how, after seeing his hometown being ravaged by war and misery over and over, he realized that mankind was doomed. So he found this way out to end the cycle of suffering. My character was the face and healer of the party. A lawful good cleric dwarf that was above all things old and wise. The BBEG's speech was so perfectly crafted that I saw through it without being cheesy. He was ridden with guilt for being unable to protect his people despite his power. To me, it was obvious. So before Green could launch his attack to stop the madness and begin the real final battle, I stepped forward and put my mace away. I told him it wasn't his fault. He did everything he could. But he can't always be there, be right and be strong. I told him that we could only do our best and inspire others to do their best. But sometimes the evil in the world does its job better than us. It wasn't fair for anyone to fault him for trying his best and failing, and I assured him that if his people were in trouble ever again, this time he'd have us at his side to help, so we could share the pride of helping and the shame of failing. The DM's ranger said that she'll go live among his people and always be ready to help. Green's fighter sheathed his blade and said that he'd train them to fight. Newt's wizard said he'd join his resources and skills with his to cast a wider protection on his people. DM thought for a while. She told me to roll diplomacy, and I did well. The BBEG broke down in tears and said it was too late to go back, that this was the best that he could do. I said that there was always time and stepped forward. The DM made us roll again. Pass. I said that nobody would fault him for this and step forward again. Roll. Fail. The BBEG said no and pointed his wand of lightning bolts at me, and the DM allowed me to make a reflex save to have an action before he cast it. I aced the save, and the DM told me I could close in, slam him with my mace before he cast it, and force him to make a concentration save. I thought about it for a second and told her that I was closing in, but to hug him. She told me that if I tried to grapple him, he'd be able to launch the spell first. I said, no grapple, just a hug. She took a few minutes, I think, to choose between game mechanics and great RP. She allowed the hug and made a roll behind the screen. She smiled and told us that the big bad evil guy hugged back. Newt quickly stepped forward to dispel the ritual, and the rest joined the hug. We swore to be better in the future and to rely on one another. We all kept our promises and helped the big bad evil guy rebuild a place for his people to live in, and the campaign ended in a really positive tone. I asked the DM what her final roll was, and she confirmed that it was a will save for the wizard. So he rolled low? I asked. No, he rolled high. His will to be better won. Best DM ever. Story number 2. A roleplay moment that caused me to cry. By the author, Shark of the Streets. About 2 years ago, my GM decided to run 5e, which I had never played before. My GM is always recommending players try new things, both mechanically and RP-wise, and he noted that I tended to lock myself into specialized roles, so he suggested that I run a druid, as they are highly versatile and adaptive. Here comes Darwin, a non-variant human druid who hails from a deadly magic-infested country known as the Savage Lands. Think of it as magical Australia. And Darwin had left his home as part of a spiritual journey everyone in his village makes as they reach adulthood. The spiritual journey varies for each person, and Darwin joked that his Nam spent 3 years on her journey, and he was looking to beat her record. I originally set Darwin up as a comic relief character, unfamiliar with the customs of civilization, making weird animal analogies, wanting to settle arguments by wrestling, and lots of cute stories about his Nam. It was all well and good, until the GM introduced us to a cult of Koatoa. My GM loves giving side story plot hooks that are character-focused, saying that they are optional, and if you don't like the direction a side story is taking your character, you can drop it and handwave any development you didn't like. But when the GM says that the chanting of the Koatoa sparked some primordial memory in Darwin, I was intrigued. It started small. A few nightmares, trouble recalling details of my past outside of Nam stories, and the desire to seek out something named Hester. The more Darwin pursued these leads, the more horrific his experiences became. He found a druidic book that no one in our party could read. When Darwin read from the book out loud, from his perspective, he was recalling the history of various druid tribes, but to the party he was detailing ritualistic sacrifices. Concerned, Darwin began seeking help from any talented mage. Many got one good whiff of Darwin and panicked, either teleporting Darwin out of their home or simply teleporting their home away from Darwin. Darwin even sought out the BBEG for help. The BBEG ran a scrying spell on Darwin, then snapped her fingers as Darwin was instantly banished from her plane. Eventually, we helped an arch-wizard, and as a favor, our party asked him to investigate Darwin. The arch-wizard cast several spells, sat Darwin down, and told him the truth. Darwin was a construct, created by an ancient being known as Hastur. His purpose was to locate one of the 8 cursed tomes that will bring Hastur into our realm. Darwin went from lovable side character to existential dread. He didn't know which memories were real or implanted. He somehow acquired one of the 8 cursed tomes, and the nagging question that kept him up at night was, "Who is my Nam?" A bunch of other PC side quests happened, and after a grueling battle, Darwin makes up his mind to go back to his homeland and find his Nam. The GM looks at me and asks if I'm sure about it. He tells me this might break Darwin. But I had made up my mind. And so, our party headed to the Savage Lands. The Savage Lands itself were openly hostile to everyone in the party, save for Darwin. All the terrain was considered difficult terrain. The magic heat required the party to take frequent breaks or take exhaustion, but we eventually made it to a shoddy village. But to Darwin, it looks like home, and a happy one at that. And greeting the party at the entranceway, a beautiful elven woman, covered in black and blue robes, and lovingly reaching out to Darwin. It was his Nam. At this point, the GM surprised us. We were playing on Discord since this was toward the beginning of the pandemic, and the GM had Nam played by his wife, who was an absolute theater kid. Nam was charming, welcoming, wise, and showed much concern for Darwin's sudden mental state. "It appears that your enchantments have cracked. Give me a minute and I'll have them all fixed up, and you won't have a single worry left in your precious little head." At that point, the GM gave me a choice. Let Nam work her magic and the nightmares stop. Darwin can live out his days as a happy-go-lucky adventurer, or declare himself an enemy to Hastur. The GM told me that overcoming Nam will not be easy. My party was at my back. Our bard inspired Darwin, and our paladin stayed close to give me courage. I shouted, "I refuse to be a puppet any longer, and I will fight Hastur to my last breath." The GM had me roll a wisdom check, and Nam was done asking politely. With the inspiration and the +3 from the paladin's aura of courage, I roll a 31. The GM describes a wave of energy bringing Darwin to his knees, and when he opens his eyes, he feels heavier. The ground was less inviting. The walls seemed to close in on him. Nam was no longer a motherly figure, but a being of spite and scorn. "Well, well," she huffs. "I don't know how you've done it, but you rejected Hastur's love. Leave now, as we have no need for a reject. You aren't the only Darwin after all. We allow you to live as thanks for your services up to now. So, the party leaves, clearly unable to fight Nam and her tribe of Hastur worshippers. The way out of the savage lands was hard even for Darwin, perhaps hardest for Darwin. He lost his home, his family, and not because some malevolent force destroyed them, but because they stood for something he was not. The GM ended the session, and as we left Discord, I cried for the first time in a TTRPG. I cried for Darwin, the optimistic druid who wanted to see the world, and is now broken and trying to piece himself together. And that wisdom roll that Darwin rolled, a 31 with the help of his friends, the DC was a 30. Story number 3. How one of my players' annoying habits turned into the most intense roleplay moments in our 18+ month-long campaign. By the author, Abaddon Destler. So, for context, annoying is a bit of a strong word to use. My friend has some little quirks that come across a little irksome, but nothing too bad or game-breaking. And anything that is I can talk to him about, and he's always improving. I also know I am not perfect, as I know I should have just expected his behavior, or, as a dungeon master, I'm just supposed to be the referee and not get upset at my players for fobbing off nice things I do for them. But there was a part of this where I was genuinely hurt by my players' words and actions. The annoying habit in question could probably be called excessive generosity. I am very heavy with my magical items in campaigns, especially to players who do not have magic. So in this campaign he is playing a halfling fighter/barbarian multiclass. We are presently around level 17. It's a bit difficult to convert as we are playing D&D 1st edition, but approximations work. Ever since the early game, he has taken his share of the loot, and then very, very quickly given away most of his magic items to NPCs, starting with a ring of Featherfall up to a magic cittern. He was planning on multiclassing into Bard, but then didn't like the look of it. That said, he gave away the cittern before deciding not to take levels in Bard. There are dozens of examples more, so I won't go into it too much, except for the most important part. The other players had already been noticing this, and for the most part it became a running joke. His character finds the sword of 9 lives.
Hey, that's a cool sword. Which NPC are you going to give it to?
His character finds a better set of armor. Wow, I wish I could wear medium armor. Think you'll give it to the barmaid or the stable boy? On and on and on. This was all in fun, and he laughed along and made the jokes too. Now to the main event. I had been setting the stones early that the characters will be meeting a legendary blacksmith, and that is where they will be getting their endgame equipment. Equipment I had been planning for their characters for a very long time. Everyone is really excited and interact with the fire giant blacksmith and his half-giant grandson as they wait for their equipment. Wizard gets her wand upgraded to its final form. Something she's wanted since she got it in session 1. Rogue gets the cool dagger he stole off of the BBEG in his session 0 upgraded to match the daggers the BBEG uses. Cleric collects the last material components he needs to finish an amazing set of armor dedicated to his god. Fighter gets a pair of scimitars for dual wielding, completely accustomed to his playstyle and technique. He is loving them and is so excited as they go into the next boss fight. He is the MVP of pure damage output and saying how much he loves the swords. The party aren't making any jokes because these are the big weapons/armor for the end of the campaign. Why would he give these away? 1 week later, Fighter announces to the party his plan for the swords. The blacksmith had given them names, Life and Soul, which was also a point of his position as the core of the party. Everyone loves him, he's sweet, he's fun, and brings that wonderful down-to-earth and comedic element to the table and the party. He decided that when they go back through his hometown before the final fight, he's going to see his parents and rename the swords after his parents. Then he was going to give each of his parents one of the swords. Note: he kept flip-flopping if he would give them the weapons before the final fight and go back to his +1 scimitar and dagger, instead of these +5 scimitars that deal necrotic and radiant damage and heal him on a critical hit. The party looks at me. I'm very good at hiding when something catches me off guard, but the wizard player, who is also my wife, knew I was upset by the thought of him giving away something I'd worked for months to balance for him, had run trial combats to balance, and were fully accustomed to his story. I'd even done his huge reveal of the blades like it was a ceremony. I was genuinely shocked. But I am the dungeon master, and no matter how something bothers me, I will never stop my players from doing something they want to. So set my feelings aside. After all, they're his swords, not mine. Fast forward about 6 sessions, and he has reiterated this point about a dozen times a session. During this time, I have had private messages from all the other players asking if I'm okay with this. And I respond the same way each time. They're his swords, it's his character, that's fine. And honestly, it was. I had plans for if he gave them up. Suddenly, the big bad evil guy has them, and has killed his parents, and he has to accept that it's his fault. He renames them, then the creator gets pissed off and demands them back. Now, the player has a fire giant with +5 armor and weapons, and a master craftsman bearing down on him. And when the players are already dealing with an army of elves and bane worshippers, it's just another problem. I'd worked it into the plot in such a way I was happy with whatever he wanted to do. The party arrives in the fighter's hometown and heads straight for his parents. They get there and it's lovely. Fighter player is nearly crying at how happy his mother is to see him, and how his father is now treating him like a real man and a warrior too. In character, his father was the one who taught him how to fight, and is one of the 8 champions in the town that train the militia. He has never been beaten in a fight, and wields a magic longsword. Fighter wants to fight his dad, for a fun sparring match. I ask in character, "Live a practice?" And he says, "Live." And we're all having so much fun, all my plans were miles away from my mind, because I was just so enjoying being in the moment and playing happy families with my players, with 2 genuinely lovely NPCs. The party heads outside to the sparring circle in the garden next to his dad's home fort, and the party are making bets on who'll win and who'll lose. It's a really close fight, but with maybe 30 out of nearly 300 HP, the fighter's dad wins. Everyone is happy, laughing, enjoying themselves. The character's dad is proud of him and says as much, which, for the player, is almost, again, too much. Then He goes into this long monologue. Dad, these swords, they're nice, aren't they? Mm-hmm. These were made by the master blacksmith of the southern wastes. They've slain demon lords and saved mine, my friends' lives dozens of times already. He called them Life and Soul, but I think a better name would be Gloria for this one, because Mom gave me life. And this one will be called Xosar after you, because it's given me the soul of a warrior like you. And I felt it. Sometimes I deep dive into certain characters, really get in their headspace. And all the pent-up frustration and hurt feelings came out in that character, because I could just feel the character would be probably more insulted by that than I was hurt. Your father goes silent and walks away to his forge. You can hear the bellows start, and you remember the only time he went like that was when he was angry about something. The table went quiet as the fighter went pale and looked confused as I asked what the party wanted to do. He followed to the forge as the rest of the party gave commiserations and concerns. I think the rest of the table were feeling pretty tense. The fighter had actively avoided, any major scenes in the campaign and never connected to any NPCs up to this point. So this was his first experience of a major scene, and he wasn't going into it good. Throughout the exchange that came after, I never raised my voice over a low, gruff voice I had used for the character throughout the meal. Dad, I think we need to talk. The forge is hot. The bellows steam. Your father doesn't look up. Pick up a spear from that barrel, Lovey. Fighter does, as he's asked. Turn that spearhead into a dagger. The pale looks at me. I don't have any blacksmithing skill. What do I do? Do you want to do as he asks, or not? I'll try. He rolls badly and at negative due to no skill in smithing. It looks like a pointy metal stick. Your father nods. Get another one. Dad, I don't... Pick up another spear. He does. Now turn that one into an axe. He tries again, and rolls worse. Can't do it, can you? No. Did you make a dagger or an axe? Well, it would certainly protect you. I didn't ask that. Did you make a dagger? Not any dagger I've ever seen. And who made daggers you've seen? Well, craftsmen. Some okay, some by masters. And you can't even make a basic dagger, yet you form a distinction. To your skill level, a hobbyist like me is a master craftsman. And like any craft, what they make is a work of art. Would you rename an artist's painting? No, but it's not a painting or song. They're swords and they're mine. Clearly you still haven't learned anything. So let's try this another way. Everything you've achieved, every life you've saved with your skill as a fighter, every foe you've slain with any blade you've ever picked up, everything you are is because of me. You are nothing without me. My teaching, my training, everything you have ever achieved is actually my achievement. You have achieved and have done nothing because it's all mine. Doesn't feel good, does it? No. I pass the fighter a beer in game, rum and coke out of game. So, What right do you think you have to take away that blacksmith's achievements, to rename his art? And even if you still think you have that right, if you think naming those swords after your ma and I would respect us, you'd be dead wrong. You'd be respecting no one. Understand? I think so. At this point, he is looking despondent at the table, at his character sheet, shocked and confused by the whole thing. Oh, and Lovey? He looked up at me. I didn't mean a word I said. I couldn't have gone on those adventures, been a hero, and saved the world. I can barely save my own sides of the world. You and your ma and this village. And the way you fight, I didn't teach you a single step of that. That is completely your own. Don't think I've seen fighting like that outside of them Drow Rangers in the deep. If you want to respect your ma and me, why not name your style after us? I never thought of it like that. And that way, I would be respecting you without taking it away from someone else. Now go inside for some cake, Lovey. I'll be in again soon. And I'm still proud of you and love you lots. I called for a short break there, and the player actually got up before I could say anything. I thought he was going to leave the table, or I had pushed it too far. Then he gave me a massive hug, and the whole group went wild. He was thanking me for such an amazing scene. Everyone was congratulating him. Anytime anyone said anything about me, I just pointed to Fighter. It was his scene. After that, the session was purely fun, and the player has been jazzed since, loving the character. The party have decided that the player's dad is now one of the best NPCs of the entire campaign. After the session, the fighter player said how much he enjoyed it all, and how that was one of his favorite parts of the campaign. He so wasn't expecting this, and said that he was sorry for trying to rename something I had worked hard on. I finally came out and told him how hurt I had been by him handing off all the items and NPCs and interactions I had planned for him, and how it made me feel like nothing I could do would be good enough for him. It was only a couple of weeks ago, but we're all still talking about that scene. Well, this was certainly a nice change of pace for once. All these horror stories can wear you out, and I have certainly enjoyed myself far more than I thought I would. So, I hope you did too. 1,000 people is a lot, and I am honestly still not quite used to the fact that we are there yet. That you are here, but happy all the same. So thank you for being here and listening to me. I shall await your next visit eagerly. But that was it for today's stories. I hope you enjoyed your stay and that I will see you again soon. For there are always more stories to be shared.